let it be what it is as far as I'm concerned.
We've got a few people hopping on. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll be here for the next, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes, something like that, talking mostly Diamondbacks. We'll go ahead and jump in, Jeff. There's a lot of news to talk about. I mean, holy cow, it has been a whirlwind of baseball here for the last few days. So I'll just run down a few things. We had earlier today, obviously, the big announcement is the expansion of the playoffs. Literally less than 3 hours before first pitch of opening day, I think they were like legally binded to get this agreement in before play started, and they beat it by 3 hours, which is just so fitting for just the messiness of the labor negotiations and everything that's happened. But Jeff, initial thoughts. We go from 10 teams to 16 teams for a team like the Diamondbacks. You know, if you were going to be one of those 10 anyway, like we suspected, then this is maybe a bad thing because suddenly you have another round of playoffs to make it through. But, you know, maybe the Diamondbacks wouldn't have. Maybe they would have just missed it. That was also very, very, very plausible. And now you have to feel a lot better about their chances of getting in.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, I kind of felt like they were going to be one of two scenarios, either like the last team in or the first team out. And so I feel a whole lot better about their chance to make it in. Obviously, it's going to be a good bit of work, once, if they are able to make it in. Because, man, if you look at, if you go to Baseball Prospectus or the Fangraphs and you look at playoff odds, the sort of the melee of teams just stuck right around, in a 60-game season, like between 28 and maybe 32 expected wins. There are just so many teams that are right there. So I have to feel a lot better about the Diamondbacks' chances. And the top two teams in each division are going to get in now. So, dethroning the Dodgers is already, feeling impossible. But, can you outplay the Rockies and the Padres? The Rockies, that should be able to accomplish that. And I think we both have some reservation about the Padres. So I really think this increases the Diamondbacks' chances. And honestly, to not have to try to take a wild card out of, away from a team in the Central or in the East and just maybe slide in as the second West team feels a lot safer to me, frankly, than trying to sort out those other, stacked divisions.
Yeah, for sure. I think the way that they plan to do it is really interesting. You mentioned the top two teams in each division make it now, which is interesting. In a way, that's like the Diamondbacks' dream, right? Like, what if instead of one division winner, there could have just been two, and suddenly, the Diamondbacks would have been in the playoffs for probably years now under a situation like this. But yeah, I think I've heard from a lot of people that the incentive to be good in the regular season suddenly kind of drops off a little bit. I've heard some people very, very critical about that. If you're taking the top 16 teams, that's more than half the league. There's going to be probably several teams that are 30-30 that make the playoffs. And on some level, if your team is average or better, these 60 games kind of become just like a preparation for what is to come in the playoffs when games really count. And you could also make the argument that, they'll have home field advantage or whatnot in the playoffs. But home field advantage is only so valuable in an empty stadium. It's clearly not nearly as valuable as it normally would be. So it seems like a mess to me, Jeff, just all of these changes, and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, and my counter argument, and I know I know the way this will end up playing out is going to be pretty different than the way the projections look. The projections kind of cluster everything, a bunch of teams right in the middle in the National League, and they'll probably see a little more separation as it goes. But in a 60-game season, let's say hypothetically the Diamondbacks snag the second spot in the West and they go 29-31. Does not look real good.
Yeah.
But what if one of the teams that gets in the wild card is 30-30?
Sure.
Are we quibbling over one game? That's one dropped catch, one missed call, one long fly ball that gets caught on a warning track. We're
sure.
I'm not going to lose any sleep over how any of this shakes out this year.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We've got some other interesting things too. Mookie Betts. There's some news that came out yesterday regarding him that I know was saddening to a number of Diamondbacks fans out there. A 12-year contract, $365 million. I think his signing bonus, Jeff, was roughly equivalent to like the actual payroll of the Baltimore Orioles right now. $65 million was his signing bonus, which, I mean, I don't know what the Orioles payroll is off the top of my head, but it's probably not that much larger than that. But yeah, I mean, Mookie Betts is going to be a Dodger through age 39, barring a trade. And for a team like the Diamondbacks, we all know they don't have the money for something like this. They went out, they signed Zach Greinke, which was a big step for them. But I don't think they're going to be giving out any 10-year plus contracts for more than $300 million anytime soon. And for a lot of people, I think it's probably kind of depressing that the Diamondbacks have lived in the Dodgers' shadow for so many years already, and they're getting probably a little bit tired of it at this point. And now it's like, okay, well, what are the next 7 years going to look like? You know, with the Dodgers having Mookie Betts, having Cody Bellinger here for a couple more seasons. What do you have any words to comfort the ailing Diamondbacks fans right now, Jeff?
I don't. I mean, I don't, and I'm not. The pure baseball fan to me is not upset that I will get to see a lot of Mookie Betts play.
That's a great point.
You can see Ken Griffey Jr. over my shoulder. I grew up as a Mariners fan. I'm not upset that I get to watch the Mariners play the Angels and I get to watch Mike Trout play. Mostly because I haven't had a whole lot to root for in Seattle. But, I don't have much to say on that. And, I mean, I think you and I kind of went back and forth yesterday when we heard the news, whether or not we felt, or kind of how we feel about that contract. And I just, a lot of big deals that don't feel good. They don't sound good. The back of it's going to be really bad. And I'm not as worried about Mookie Betts aging as I am a lot of other players.
Sure.
The only thing that could cause me concern is he's not a real big guy. That plays in his favor in the sense that I don't think he's going to slow down tremendously. He will lose a step, but it's not like he relies on being this hulking, power machine. He's an athlete. He's a real true athlete. And so the only thing that could really slow him down would be injuries. He's been pretty healthy throughout his career. So, man, I think if you're, I think for Diamondbacks fans, I just don't think there's really anywhere to hide with this. Like, I don't think there's any way that you can tell yourself, well, they'll pay the price in, 20, whatever year that is, 32 or whatever. So, yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just I think he's going to be a pain in the butt for like a super long time.
Yeah, I think that's the sad reality of it. The Diamondbacks also today, they announced their 30-man roster. We'll kind of switch gears and talk a little D-backs here. Yeah. Not too surprising looking at it. I have it pulled up here over to my right. I think you mentioned earlier today over Twitter, Dalton Varsho wasn't on the taxi squad, which is interesting. We kind of figured he might be the next catcher in line after Carson Kelly and Stephen Vogt. Instead, they went with John Hicks for that kind of third catcher spot. Joe Mantiply as well as Wyatt Matheson are also joining Hicks on the taxi squad list. Some people I know, I also saw a few fans not super pleased to see Taylor Widener and Taylor Clark on the 30-man roster, which is understandable given what we saw earlier this week. To those people, I would say, don't worry too much. I don't think you're going to see Taylor Widener pitching the 9th inning in a 4-3 game anytime soon. Same goes with Taylor Clark. They're going to get low leverage innings. I think they're really there because they're stretched out to a certain degree. And in the event that one of these pitchers, one of their starting pitchers suddenly went down with an injury or COVID, I think Alex Young would be the next guy in line, and then you would get to Taylor Clark and Taylor Widener. So at the end of the day, you're probably not going to see these guys pitch too much in a game anytime soon. But Jeff, I mean, is there anything I'm missing here? It didn't seem like any big surprises. John Jay was on the list. We were kind of expecting that. He's had a nice summer camp by all accounts. Josh Rojas made the team as well. I think he was maybe a little bit on the edge after not playing so well toward the end of last season. But other than that, it seemed pretty much like we would have expected.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was really no big shock. I thought Varsho had a chance on that taxi squad in that sense where he's super versatile. He could catch. You could put him at second base. He could play the outfield in a pinch. But maybe maybe he just ends up skipping the taxi squad thing altogether and ends up getting called up at some point. So
Sure.
I still think we probably see him somewhere down the line. I really do. Unless other guys are playing so well that there's just really not a spot for him, and that's frankly fine too. But in the absence of that, I think we probably see him. I think you're totally right on Widener and Clark. I think what we saw in Los Angeles certainly wasn't pretty. They got pounded, and things were, and the way in which it happened wasn't great. We saw a lot of fringy pitching against, as you called it, and you're right, probably the best lineup in the National League, if not maybe the majors. When you throw sort of, quad A, guys out there, 6th, 7th starters at that lineup, I mean, you should probably hide your eyes. Like, it's not going to be good. But what bothered me a little bit was the way the offense just didn't respond. I mean, we saw a lot of non-competitive at bats from guys that are going to play prominent roles. We saw some first pitch swinging. It was just some really questionable decisions, some kind of bad body language. So some of that was not real great. So I'll look for them tomorrow to kind of get themselves out of that funk a little bit. But the roster really shaped up the way I think we thought it probably would. It doesn't look like they took any chances, and that's fine. I guess my only thought was when 6 hours ago now, when playoff format was changed, was thinking would you do anything different now? I mean, you put the tweet out, you've submitted the roster that's gone through. Is there anything that you would do differently now, knowing what you know? And I think for the D-backs, they need to really push to beat the Padres and secure that second spot. But I don't know if another move right this very second, is necessary.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That was another piece of news that I didn't really want to address, but we probably should. The whole Monday and Tuesday shellacking 21-3, the Diamondbacks were outscored by the Los Angeles Dodgers, which honestly, it kind of brought me back to last season. Opening day, the Diamondbacks started out in Los Angeles, and Zach Greinke had a just horrific meltdown in that first game of the season. And I know, bad memories. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. I had not thought about that in a long time either. And suddenly the memories came rushing back. But I think another thing you just kind of have to come to terms with is the Dodgers are a very, very, very good team. And just that lineup that they're putting out with Mookie Betts and Cody Bellinger, both of those guys are probably top 5, top 10 hitters in the game right now. And you put Justin Turner and Jock Peterson and all of these, and Max Muncy, and all of these guys who frankly would be a probably number 3, number 4 hitter on most other teams. Those guys are batting 7th on the Dodgers in some cases, like with Jock Peterson. So the Dodgers are a very, very good team, and like you said, we're not really surprised that when you throw a quad A pitcher out there against a lineup that's good, it will be ugly from time to time. We have a comment here from Mac Attack. We'd encourage all of you guys chime in. We're here to answer questions too. We've got some things to talk about, but we'd love to hear from you guys as well. Mac Attack says Crone. Is it Crone and Lamb in a DH platoon, or is that spot Jake Lamb's to lose? Which is interesting. I mean, I think the platoon kind of makes sense because Jake Lamb. I don't think you really want Jake Lamb in a lineup against a lefty anytime soon. So I would probably err on the side of a platoon there, with maybe the idea of putting Ildemaro Vargas in that spot from time to time if there isn't room for him in the field. Jeff, what are your thoughts on the DH for the D-backs?
I mean, I think in some ways it's going to come down to something that we saw that it looks like Torey announced here somewhat recently, earlier today, was Christian Walker will serve as the DH tomorrow during opening day. So I think it probably, at least to start the season, is really tied to Christian Walker's health. If he's, athletically and defensively, you want him at first base all the time.
Yeah.
That's the best bat. That's the best option. And then, I probably play some matchups, and I don't even know that it necessarily has to just be lefty righty. I think Lamb, obviously, you don't let him face a lefty for really any reason, especially during these first couple of weeks when the rosters are big. Like, just don't do it.
There's no reason. There's just no reason to. Yeah.
No, time is short. Yeah, let's do something else. But I do think that there may be some matchups that even in a case where a right-hander against Cron is maybe a better move, depending on what Jake struggles with and what, Cron handles well. So Cron to me really seems like just an absolute fastball hitter. And Lamb has had his moments kind of with that as well, but maybe has a little more control in that sense. So I do think that in some instances, you could split the platoon beyond just left-right, but that's probably the direction I would go, unless they really scuffle. And I mean, we obviously only really got to see a little bit of action before things are going to kick off here. And, what I've seen from Lamb hasn't been real encouraging.
No.
I mean, and I think we kind of know the book on Cron in a sense where, he could run into some pitches, they go a real long ways. But other times he just looks a little overmatched. So maybe a little more hopeful on Cron at this point, unless Lamb can really find his comfort quickly. But I don't have a good answer. I mean, that's probably how I'd play it to start with. And then if those things start to fizzle, then maybe you do look sort of, Ildemaro's swinging really well. Let's get him some looks.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I agree that I don't think it's really very cut and dry. I don't think Jake Lamb and Kevin Cron have even necessarily set themselves apart from the competition. And given, like you said, that there's such a big roster to start things out with, there's really no reason for the Diamondbacks to give Cron and Lamb a job that they haven't necessarily earned just yet. I think you'll see the Diamondbacks mix it up a lot there. I think Christian Walker, ideally, like you said, is your first baseman, not your DH. But given his injury, maybe that's just a temporary thing that he'll be DH here for a little while. Some other thoughts here, Jeff. I know the lineups were really interesting against the Dodgers. The Diamondbacks used Cole Calhoun in the leadoff spot, which I don't think we saw in spring training at all, but suddenly Torey Lovullo put that out. I think he announced later, though, that was really just to get Cole Calhoun the most at-bats possible, given that he was coming back from an injury. So I know I read a ton into that and looked up all sorts of stats comparing Cole Calhoun and Starling Marte, who I think is who a lot of people would expect to be the logical leadoff hitter. Jeff, what are your thoughts on just the lineup card and what it might look like tomorrow? Torey didn't. He was asked in a press conference today to reveal the lineup. He wouldn't do it. Wanted to wait until tomorrow. What are you expecting to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I was obviously like you a little surprised with Calhoun. I do know he can get on base, and even during some of his seasons when he really did sort of scuffle there with Anaheim, he was able still to get on base at a decent clip. I still like Starling Marte there. I really do like the guy that can he can fly. I'm telling you, man, and I like it for two reasons. I like it because I love the way the lineup card looks when it says Starling is batting first and Cattell is batting second, and then everyone else's last names. Yeah. But those guys get their first names. Sure. So I love that. But also, you get Starling Marte on with his ability to steal, and you put Cattell Marte at the plate. I mean, I like my odds. I like that scenario. Let's put it this way. I want that scenario as often as I can get it. I want that scenario as often as I can get it. So that would really be probably the tip of my lineup more often than not. I know that Starling is not a big walker, but he does make a lot of contact. Does have some real feel for the barrel. So he's going to put the ball in play. He's not going to strike out too much. And that's probably where I think it starts. I love the notion of giving Cattell as many at bats as possible. First and second isn't that big, and a lot of sabermetric studies have really revealed that batting second in the lineup is arguably more valuable than batting third. So, and now we don't have a pitcher batting ninth. So I just love I think I would really be pretty willing to write Cattell's name in ink at the second spot, and then kind of work it from there with probably Starling as my preference to bat lead off to begin with.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but part of the reason I did like Calhoun in the leadoff spot was that historically they've actually both led off a lot in their careers, which is not particularly surprising with a guy with Starling Marte's speed. But Cole Calhoun does not really fit the bill as, prototypical leadoff hitter. He strikes out a lot, has a decent amount of power, doesn't really steal bases at all. But he has more than 1,000 plate appearances during his time with the Angels in the leadoff spot. He was actually better in the leadoff spot than he was elsewhere in the lineup. And Starling Marte, on the other hand, actually his performance fell off a little bit in the leadoff spot, whereas he was really effective when he was batting third. Obviously, these are not all splits are meaningful, right? Like, you don't want to put too much into this. Right. Some years guys bat 350 at home and 250 on the road, but that doesn't necessarily mean they actually, are way better hitting at home or anything like that. So you don't want to put too much onto those numbers, but for me, it was telling that for a guy like Starling Marte, he's actually not used to batting leadoff that much as of late. Just given the fact that he was on the Pittsburgh Pirates, he was pretty much their best hitter for several years. He was the guy in the middle of the lineup. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how much you want to put into those numbers, but those were at least a few thoughts into why I thought maybe Calhoun makes more sense than you would initially think in that leadoff spot.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I don't hate the idea of toggling my leadoff hitters. You want to bat Calhoun there against righties and bat Starling there against lefties. That's fine with me. So I like Torey's ability to kind of mix and match. He's got a couple guys there, and still either way. I mean, I know that Calhoun isn't necessarily the threat to swipe a bag the way maybe Starling is, but I still like just getting people on base in front of Ketel Marte because he is just far and away the team's best hitter. I mean, it's just not close. So the more guys that you can pile up in front of him, the better I'm going to feel. And then obviously I think, Christian Walker needs to hit up there, and he needs to really cement his spot. I think it's really unfortunate he's coming in a little dinged up because he was probably primed to really have a pretty strong campaign. He was a little hot and cold last year, but when he was hot, he was really hot. And from there, you just kind of have a lot of options, Then you can bounce back to the left side with David Peralta, or you start to really mix and match. So I think Torey will probably play with it a little bit early on. I don't know. That's kind of my read. I mean, he doesn't seem to be afraid to kind of tinker with the lineup.
Oh, no.
and I don't mind that. I really don't, and especially in a 60-game season. I'm just, find what clicks, find where guys are comfortable, and let's kind of find that. We're going to have to find it pretty fast.
Sure. Yeah. One thing I want to talk about just briefly is about the Diamondbacks' opponent in their opening series, the San Diego Padres. I know a lot of people have maybe been put off by just how positive the outlook is on the Padres, how a lot of people have picked them to finish above the Diamondbacks. I was on a podcast earlier today. It was hosted by a couple of Yankee fans, and they asked me whether the Diamondbacks would finish second or third in the NL West. I said second, and they were like, whoa, you think you're going to be better than the Padres? And I was like, I didn't know that was such a dramatic, such a hot take to have. But apparently, that's kind of the situation that we're in right now with the Padres. The moves that they made over the offseason, they got Drew Pomeranz, who I know was a highly sought-after piece out of the bullpen, and then just getting Fernando Tatis back from injuries. But on the other hand, I'm like, the Padres haven't been good in years, frankly. And even they weren't really that good last year. So how big of a turnaround do you think the Padres can realistically have this quick?
I mean, it depends on how quickly they're willing to dip into some of their youth, right? I mean, their farm system is loaded, has been loaded for quite some time. A bunch of those guys are knocking on the door. So to me, it's a little bit about, are they willing to start some service clocks? If someone scuffles, you call up Mackenzie Gore. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah.
And then to me, Manny Machado is just kind of a wild card. He could be an absolute monster, or, what you get from him, I don't feel very comfortable with.
Yeah.
I think Tatis is absolutely the real deal. Guys like Chris Paddock are the real deal. They have some absolute star power. But yeah, I'm a little bit, I'm a little lukewarm. I don't know how much to trust them. You and me, we've seen a lot of games played, against the Padres, and we've had this joke, or at least I have, where it's like you think they're going to be really good, and then midway through the season, half their roster are guys that they've called up from El Paso and are batting 4, 5, 6 in their lineup, and I'm just
Sure.
Why is Ty France the cleanup batter on a team that's supposed to be pretty good? No offense, Ty France, but it's just, are you really going to be able to roll with the rest of the National League that's pretty deep this year? If that's your reality. So they've got to stay healthy. They may need to start some service clocks. I think there's a lot of talent there. I think Dinelson Lamet he's a guy that I'm just super high on, and I think he's going to be way better than people think. But I think the Diamondbacks honestly are probably a little bit deeper in terms of their present major league talent.
Yeah, we can look at the starting rotations of these two teams, and even I believe we have probables for at least the weekend part of the series.
We should, yeah.
Yeah, so it should be. I think it's Madison Bumgarner and Chris Paddock will be obviously tomorrow. That's no surprise there. And then on Saturday we have Robbie Ray for the Diamondbacks, and then he is countered by, I believe it's Dinelson Lamet for the Padres, and then on Sunday it's Zach Gallen against Garrett Richards. Garrett Richards was once upon a time a very, very good pitcher who's been
very good pitcher, yes.
Been rattled by injuries for a long time. So there's some wild cards in there. You mentioned Lamet. His strikeout per 9 last year was above 12, I want to say, which is really impressive for a starting pitcher. Obviously, with our experience with Robbie Ray, we know that a K per 9 of 12 doesn't necessarily make you an ace, but it's sure a starting point. And I've had some conversations with people about this already, and I think the one game in this series, at least over the first 3 into the weekend, I think the Padres probably have the pitching advantage tomorrow. I would argue Chris Paddock, I think, is frankly a better pitcher than Madison Bumgarner at this stage, which I know I might have tomatoes thrown at me for saying that, but I think that's just
both of us.
I think that's just kind of the case at this point. Paddock was really good last year. He was really good against the Diamondbacks too. He had an ERA of about 1 against the Diamondbacks in 3 starts, which is not great news. And Bumgarner is fine. He's good. But I think Paddock is probably the better pitcher there. But going into Saturday and Sunday, I think I would probably take Robbie Ray over Dinelson Lamet, given what we've seen from Robbie Ray in summer camp. And maybe Zach Gallen narrowly I would take over Garrett Richards, but it also depends on which version of Garrett Richards we get. So it really, I feel like normally, you look at a series with the Padres and you've got the pitching advantage in all 3 of the games, but I don't think it's that simple this weekend, Jeff.
I don't either. I mean, I don't either. I think you're right. I think Paddock can absolutely shove with the best of them. I have not seen a pitcher as young as him come out and pitch with the sort of, just frankly anger that he seems to pitch.
He has some anger. He does.
Yeah. And he seems to like to work it out on the mound. So he's a scary dude. He just comes right after everybody with quality stuff. Not too dissimilar from kind of, in some ways what a Madison Bumgarner was, maybe in his prime. A guy who really attacked hitters, maybe didn't have quite the elite velocity, but also never refused to back down. And I don't think that's changed either. I think, when we look at those two teams, though, because I think this division and ultimately that playoff berth are going to come down to those two teams. I really think this is for this division, this is the race to watch. What do you get out of Garrett Richards? Does he give you what you think you're going to get?
Sure.
Or does he give you 2 starts and his elbow hurts and he's done for the season?
Yeah.
The good news for the Padres is they have quality that they can call up if they want to do it to replace something like that in the way that the Diamondbacks can't. The bringing up someone like Mackenzie Gore or Adrian Morejon will be a better would be a better outcome than bringing like Alex Young into the rotation for the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
So they have a little more to survive it, but it's just unproven and it's a little shaky. So I think this is a big series for the D-backs, and after they're getting their butts frankly kicked, badly in LA. I hope they're angry, because it would be a big statement to come out and take 2 of 3 to start the season.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question, another one from MacAttack71, who's still with us. He asked a really tough one. Who leads in pitching WAR to finish the season for the Diamondbacks? That's a hard question. I think you could make a case for really any of 4 pitchers. I think everyone aside from Merrill Kelly, there's probably a case to be made, which we've been talking about over on our website at therattle.net. Our other writer, Joshua Inman, wrote a few really good pieces outlining the case for all of the members of the rotation, except for Merrill Kelly. They all have a viable case to be ace of this staff. We really don't know who that is. I'll try to make a decision here on the spot. I'm gonna say in 2020, I'm gonna guess Robbie Ray has the highest pitching WAR. I think, as we saw in 2018 with Patrick Corbin, there's something about the walk year that gets pitchers to kind of kick things up a notch, and Robbie Ray certainly looked the part in summer camp. That's my pick, but I could go any of a number of directions. What do you think, Jeff?
I'm sitting here like going 60 games, 5 pitchers. They should all get the same number of starts.
Sure.
My answer is going to be whoever gets more starts, because I think it's that close. I think, and also maybe if we were to take this super seriously, it might depend on what version of WAR you want to use. But yeah, to me, it's probably between Ray or Gallen. Gallen is maybe risky because we haven't seen a ton of him. We've seen a lot of guys come up and have a really good first season, and then the book is out. And then sophomore year, it's like, I got to adjust because they've adjusted to me.
Totally.
That's something I'm going to watch really closely. Like, does he come out and just keep pumping strikes and throwing quality stuff? Or are guys like sitting on things now and like, hey, man, we've got you figured out. Like, you may have come up from AAA, gone to Miami, and then jumped into our division and kind of caught us by surprise. But now we know about a whole winter to plan, and now spring and most of summer. But then I also think of Ray. It's like he could be absolutely frustrating, or if the guy just needs to make like 10, 11, 12 starts, I mean, he could go on a run where he just absolutely piles up strikeouts. So I'm probably with you. I think I'd probably take Robbie Ray.
Yeah, that is a really good question. We could even play the same game on the position player side. I think obviously Ketel Marte's number 1, no question there.
Sure.
But
we could ask who's going to be the runner-up.
Yeah, we could ask who's going to be the runner-up, and I really don't know. This is another thing that I wrote about at one point over on our website, and it was one of those articles where you kind of analyze a situation, but you don't really come to a firm conclusion because you're a little bit too scared to make any big proclamations. And I think there's a lot of guys who fit into this conversation with the Diamondbacks on the position player side. Even if we exclude the pitchers, there's still plenty of options. I think Starling Marte was really good last year. He's maybe the closest thing the D-backs have to a 5-tool player, where he can really do just about anything, including stealing bases, which is something they don't have a lot of on their lineup. Eduardo Escobar hit 35 home runs last year. David Peralta kind of has a long track record. I don't know, Jeff. I think there's a lot of ways you could go with something like this.
See, and I also think that like Peralta is another guy who is in a contract year, so like he's just in the sense of like our feedback around Ray, like it makes sense. He needs a big year. He's entering free agency way later than he probably ever intended because of the positional change and all that. So. Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think if I had to bet, I'd probably bet on Starling Marte, just given the combination of, what he can do at the plate, what he can do from a base running standpoint, and what he contributes defensively.
Sure.
He's good enough defensively that WAR will capture that and give him the positional adjustment for playing center field that will really benefit him. That even though a guy like Christian Walker is tremendously talented at first base, he'll just never get the accolades because it's first base.
Yeah, we've played that game with Paul Goldschmidt in the MVP race before. We all know how that works out.
yeah, I think it's good for about second. So yeah, I that's probably where I'd go. But yeah, you could really make a case for a guy like Escobar. I mean, man, he has been such a pleasant surprise in his time in Arizona. You go a number of ways there, and I think it speaks to the depth, but like they're clearly also the fact that you can't obviously answer this question could highlight a bit of a problem, because if Cattell is scuffling, who kind of picks up the slack? I mean, it has to be done by committee, and that's all well and good as long as the committee's up to the task, but there's just really not that clear-cut guy.
Yeah, I think if you look even a couple years into the future too, I have a feeling it wouldn't be any of those guys that we've talked about. I think it would probably be, Dalton Varsho, or maybe Carson Kelly really becomes, a solid everyday star catcher, really puts everything together. I don't think Eduardo Escobar is the best, second best player on the Diamondbacks 2 years from now, and that really just makes things even more intriguing. Mac Attack, who is still with us, we appreciate all your engagement, Mac Attack. This is phenomenal. He wanted to know if David Peralta signed a 3-year extension, which I believe he did. So David Peralta will be with the Diamondbacks here for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's late, Jeff. It's after work. You're all good. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, thinking about what's going to go down tomorrow and just playing a season in a pandemic is one thing that we haven't really touched on yet. And that is very complicated, as we all know. I mean, Juan Soto tested positive this morning. Who knows how long he'll be out for. And I think for the Nationals, Juan Soto is kind of like a Ketel Marte figure for them, where they don't really have, I guess Trey Turner is a pretty good position player, but definitely doesn't have the star power that Juan Soto has. And that's just kind of part of what this bizarre 2020 baseball experience is going to be like, is just that any player at any time, they don't have to pull a hamstring, they don't have to strain their oblique. They might just someday just not be able to play for 2 weeks because of COVID-19. And that's just kind of the world that we live in. And I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if you think the Diamondbacks are better prepared for something like that than other teams. I think Dalton Varsho is probably my first man up for a lot of different scenarios, just given how much he can move around the field. I think he's probably your next best bet in a lot of situations, but it's going to be a complicated season, and we're just beginning to see what that looks like right now.
Yeah, I agree. We totally don't have a clear picture of this. We don't know what it looks like. And to your point, one day you wake up and it's just so that's done.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, 2 weeks is, obviously the best case scenario. I mean, you're asymptomatic and you spend your 2 weeks and you test and you come back clean and you come right back and you jump right back in. I mean, but there's the whole flip side of the coin where someone's really sick and, we lose them, for the season or, heaven forbid their lives. So, that's just going to be a big thing and it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be disruptive to clubhouses. It's going to be disruptive maybe in some ways to team chemistry a little bit. So, I do think the Diamondbacks, there's 2 guys on the position side that I think really help them in this regard. You mentioned the first one is Varsho. The next one is Ildemaro Vargas, who can just play all over the infield, is starting to grow into his power and into his strength, is becoming a more physical player, while probably not quite at the age yet where he's really slowing down a bunch physically. So he could probably still kind of do it all in that regard. So I think those 2 guys are really pivotal for them in that sense. And then, just keeping a guy like Timmy LaCastro around. I mean, with the extra inning rule being what it is, I mean, I will gladly give up just about any hitter in the lineup to stick Tim LaCastro on second base to start an inning.
Sure.
So that feels pretty good. So I think positionally they're in pretty good shape. I just think that if they're to lose one of the starting pitchers, things could be really challenging for them. I think that's really where things could be ugly if a Zach Gallen or a Robbie Ray or a Madison Bumgarner or even a Luke Weaver is to go down. I think that's where things get dicey really quick because they don't have the immediate reinforcements that can probably provide quite the quality.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I think Vargas is a great point. I think another name we might even throw in there is Josh Rojas. We don't really know if he's there yet from a performance standpoint on offense, but he at least has the versatility to move around. and he has, some prospect pedigree to live up to in a way, and maybe he'll, figure some things out here in his sophomore season. Jeff, before we say goodbye, I want to finish off here with each of us giving an X factor for this 2020 season. If you had to pick one player on this Diamondbacks team who has the biggest impact, whether they're good or whether they're bad or not so great here in this shortened season, that it would have, a tremendous impact on the outcome of the team as a whole. I'll go ahead and start and give mine. I'll give you a second to think. I don't want to push it on you right away.
Appreciate that.
So I'm going to start, and I will say that the biggest X factor for the Diamondbacks in 2020, I think, is going to be Madison Bumgarner. And I know this is strange because it's like, oh, he's your ace. Like, why would you pick him? He's kind of expected to be good anyway. But I think based on what Bumgarner did last season, a lot of the projections for him, whether you're looking at ZiPS or whatever projection system you want to use, almost all the projections for him are an ERA north of 4.5. And if you get that out of your number one spot in the rotation, I think that really tapers how good of a team the Diamondbacks could really be. Because at that point, you're looking at Robbie Ray to kind of lead your staff. Hopefully you can get some good stuff from Zach Gallen, but I think that really thins things out. Whereas if Madison Bumgarner is able to kind of Zach Greinke his way into some adjustments later in his career that suddenly make him not the pitcher he was, but maybe a pitcher close to that, I think that would be huge for the Diamondbacks. But honestly, this is a question, Jeff. I think you could pick a number of names. There's a lot of different cases to be made out there, but what name would you pick?
I'll be honest, man. My very first inclination was to pick Madison Bumgarner. So I guess we're sharing a wavelength there in that regard, because for all the reasons you mentioned, they just they don't have the depth to replace it. I think you're right on. And he's young enough and early enough in that contract that we need to still be living up to the top end of that. So
sure.
I totally agree. I'm going to go to the positional side, and I'm just going to bank on Ketel being Ketel. So we'll just put that aside. I'm going to take Christian Walker. I think the Diamondbacks really need that one more bat in the lineup. Another guy who's a big time power threat, who's going to either put a ball in the gap or over the fence. Can hit in the middle of the lineup day in, day out, and really give them some balance. They can be at times a little left-handed, especially if Lamb takes kind of that DH spot. So,
sure.
They kind of need that right-handed thump, and I think he can give that to them. And the reason that I call him out is partly because he extends the lineup, and I think he has just as much or more power potential than anyone in the lineup. But we've only seen him play one major league season.
Yeah,
he's played before last year. He played parts of 4 major league seasons, but I think the grand total of all of that experience was less than 60 games. So last year was really his rookie year. We really need that to be solidified. I think that would go a long way, and there are some younger kids kind of nipping at his heels should he scuffle. So I think he's a guy that just has the ability with the bat to really propel the offense in a way that few others can, and I think they're going to need him to be able to do that, as really provide sort of that secondary threat beyond Ketel Marte.
Well, there was no one more disappointed to hear that Clayton Kershaw was being placed on the IL with back stiffness than Christian Walker. There's some kind of history there.
Home runs.
Oh man. But for everyone who has spent this time with us, Mac Attack, we appreciate you popping in with some questions. Well, yep. I'm sure we'll hop on. We'll try to do this again at some point. I know you guys are not used to seeing our faces. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe they didn't want to see our faces, Jeff. I don't know.
Face for radio.
Yeah, there you go. We got the face for radio. No one wanted to see us anyway. But we have baseball tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen. I know I'll be watching for sure. I'll be live tweeting as always. Jeff, I'm sure you'll be doing whatever you can as well on that front.
Probably giving you a hard time on Twitter.
Yeah. There you go. Roasting me on Twitter, just in your comfort zone is normal. But there's baseball less than 24 hours from today. It has been a long road to get here. We obviously hope that all of you, our listeners, are able to stay safe through all of the craziness happening in the world right now. We certainly wish you the best. And there's baseball tomorrow, so things can only go up from here, hopefully. We'll see how it all turns out. But for Jeff Wiser, my name is Jesse Friedman. Thank you so much for joining us on this live stream and on this episode of the Rattle Podcast. And we'll be back again soon to talk more about the Arizona Diamondbacks.